Let's explore the foundations of speech as a skilled work. First, sociolinguists emphasize that speech is not just an automatic reflex like sneezing, nor is it simply a spontaneous expression of emotion like laughing. It's more deliberate than that. When we talk about speech as work, we're highlighting that it requires conscious effort, both physically and mentally. Speaking takes energy, and anyone who's given a long conversation knows it can be tiring. Now, when we say skilled, we mean that speech involves a certain know-how, something like a set of skills you develop over time. Just like riding a bike or playing an instrument, your ability to speak well depends on your experience and practice. Some people are naturally better at it, but most of us improve with effort. Because speech is a skill, there's naturally variability in ability. Some people are more fluent or articulate than others, and that explains common social mishaps like becoming tongue-tied or accidentally dropping a brick, which is a social gaffe. Or sometimes we find ourselves stuck, not knowing the right thing to say. Recognizing speech as a skill helps us understand these moments aren't just random. They're part of the complex work involved in communicating effectively. Let's talk about interaction as a skilled performance. Argyll and Kendon in 1967 compared face-to-face communication to car driving. Think about it. It's an organized, skilled activity where some people pass the test and others might struggle. The idea is that communicating well is something you develop, much like a driver hones their skills. Now, proficiency isn't always the same across the board. Someone might be excellent at intellectual debates, but find social chit-chat or phatic communion challenging. Conversely, someone else might be great at small talk, but less confident with more complex discussions. Success really depends on the specific speech act involved. So, how do we measure success in conversation? Mainly, we look at whether the speaker's intentions are achieved. It's not just about sounding good or being fluent. It's about whether the interaction meets the goals of the person speaking. And this brings us to an interesting point about balance. Take a chatterbox, someone who fills every silence, and compare them to a very silent person. Both might see themselves as successful, but for different reasons. The chatterbox feels successful because they fill those awkward gaps, while the quiet person might see success in avoiding trivial talk. It's all about how each individual balances the need to connect with the desire to avoid unnecessary or trivial conversation. Connecting this to our overall theme, understanding interaction as a skill helps us appreciate the nuances of communication and why different people approach it differently. Let's take a closer look at the hierarchy of communicative skills. This hierarchy is arranged in a way that starts with very specific skills at the bottom and moves up to more general skills at the top. Essentially, it shows how different abilities are layered and related in language use. Now, when we talk about general versus specific skills, the general skills are broad. For example, avoiding ambiguity or making clear statements. These are foundational but quite broad in scope. On the other hand, specific skills are more targeted. They deal with particular linguistic items or situations. Think of it as knowing exactly when to say, sir, or how to handle a specific social context. An important concept here is cognitive efficiency. In a real-life interaction, speakers usually don't apply broad, general rules all the time. Instead, they look for the most specific skill relevant to the situation. This is because applying general rules takes more mental effort and is often less successful in practice. So, speakers tend to be more efficient by using specific, situationally appropriate skills. This brings us to situational mastery. For example, if you're buying a bus ticket, it's much easier and safer to use a learned, routine phrase rather than trying to craft a new, complex request on the spot. Saying "one ticket to downtown, please" is straightforward. Mastery of these specific, routine skills is a hallmark of an effective communicator because it helps navigate interactions smoothly and confidently. Overall, understanding this hierarchy helps us see how communicative skills develop and function, moving from specific routines to more flexible, general abilities, so we can become more effective and adaptable speakers in any situation. Let's explore the motivation behind our speech and the concept of face work. First, acquisition through socialization. Think of speech as a skill we learn by observing others, much like picking up vocabulary or grammar. For example, when we watch someone ordering a meal in a restaurant, we learn not just the words, but the social act itself. Next, we consider the motivation for effort. A key question in sociolinguistics is why people are willing to follow social rules and put effort into their speech. Why do we care about how we speak and how others perceive us? This leads us to Irving Goffman's theory of face. The idea of face refers to our self-respect or dignity. Because we live social lives and depend on others, our face is fragile, easily damaged if we're not careful. Now, to maintain this dignity, we engage in face work. This is the effort we put into our speech to protect our face. We do this not only to save our own dignity, but also to safeguard the dignity of others. By doing so, we help ensure that our interactions go smoothly and without conflict. So, in essence, our speech is motivated by the desire to maintain our social face, and face work is the way we actively manage and protect that social self. This connects directly to the overall theme of how social dynamics influence our communication. Let's talk about social competence and this idea of the faulty interactant. When someone doesn't perform the social work of face work effectively, that is, managing impressions and interactions, it can lead to pretty serious social consequences. People might feel uncomfortable or awkward around them, and in some cases, these interactions just fall flat or get killed. Now, Goffman called this person a faulty interactant, meaning someone who chronically makes others feel uneasy or who seems to derail social encounters altogether. This isn't just about personality, it's about a failure in social skill or motivation, or sometimes both. It could be a lack of understanding of social rules, or maybe they just aren't motivated to put in the effort to make interactions smooth. And here's the key point. Speech isn't just an individual activity. It's a social skill learned through cultural norms. When someone is labeled a faulty person, in this context, it means they're not meeting those cultural expectations that guide normal human behavior. So ultimately, social competence depends on mastering these shared rules. When someone fails at that, it shows how deeply social speech and interaction are embedded in our culture and our learned skills.